I mean, how long can a person be expected to wait? I mean, seriously, how long do you have to wait? It seems like I've been waiting for Mary my whole life. You know, growing up together in a little town like Nazareth, I mean, we'd known each other our whole lives, and it seems like we were pretty young when I fell in love with Mary and just knew that someday she would be my wife. But she was young, and of course we had to wait a long time until we could be betrothed. And that's a year-long process. I mean, I had lots to do. That was the year when I had to finish building the house for Mary and me to live in, and I was going to make all the furniture for our house. I mean, I'm a carpenter after all. And Mary, she deserved the finest. I wanted to make her the most beautiful table in the whole city of Nazareth and the strongest and sturdiest stools. I was excited, but boy, the time was going so slow. I mean, even though we saw each other often, we were hardly ever alone together. I was waiting, and I was anxious. I remember one Sabbath in the synagogue, the story from the Torah was a story about the guy in the Old Testament, Jacob, who worked for 7 years in order to marry the woman he loved, Rachel. And at the end of those 7 years, he ended up marrying the other sister, Leah, and so he had to work another 7 years for Rachel. And it said the most amazing thing. It said that the whole time to him was just like a day because of the great love that he had for Rachel. And I heard that and I thought, that's crazy. It's like 10 years for me just waiting this 1 year for Mary. I loved her so much, and we were so excited about what our life together could be like. Then things started to change, and I couldn't really understand what was happening. It was like Mary, well, she was withdrawn and quiet. She wasn't like she had usually been. And I said to her, Mary, what's going on in your life? Don't you love me anymore? She said, no, it's not that. But she just wouldn't tell me anything until finally one day she took me aside and she said, I've got to tell you now, Joseph, I'm with child. Oh, God, I was so angry. I just wanted to kill somebody. Mary, tell me who the man is who did this to you. Tell me who he is. She said, no, you don't understand. No man did this to me. Yes, Mary, please tell me. I can help you. And she made up this incredible story that the child to be born to her was actually the Son of God, that there was no earthly father, that God himself had come upon her. And the child to be born to her was the Messiah that we'd been waiting for so long. Oh, Mary. Mary, why are you saying that kind of thing? You're just in denial. Just tell me the truth. I can accept it. No, stop. I don't want to hear any more about the Messiah. I mean, think about it, Mary. How long have we waited for the Messiah to come? How long has Israel been hoping that God would send this son of David? 2,000 years? 1,000 years since David? I mean, let's face it, Mary, there is no Messiah. God is not going to send a son. I could count on the fingers of one hand the men in the synagogue who finally still believe that God's going to send his Messiah. Mary, just tell me the truth. Please tell me the truth. I mean, if God were going to send his Messiah, would he send him now, in our day? Would he send him a hick town like Nazareth? Would he pick someone like you, Mary, a pregnant peasant woman? It was over. I mean, I didn't stop loving Mary, but I just knew we could never marry now. I thought if I divorced her quietly, just put an end to our betrothal, that, well, her parents still loved her and cared for her. They could send her to some relative somewhere to have the child. They could lie and say that, that the father, Mary's husband, had died or something. She could still be protected. It could still work out for good for her. Well, that's when it happened. I got the surprise of my life. The very same angel that had appeared to Mary appeared to me one night. And I tell you, it was so different than anything you might have expected. I mean, the guy was huge, this glorious, glowing, majestic, awesome. angel standing there in front of me, and I thought when he opened his mouth and spoke, it'd be like thunder. And he was like a whisper instead. Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife. For that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Well, made a believer out of me, I can tell you. And so Mary and I were married, and we began our lives together. And it began to make sense to me. I mean, if God was going to send his Messiah, why not send him now? Why not send him in our time? If I were God and I were going to choose a woman to be the mother of my son on earth, I'd look for a woman who was pure and good and kind and joyful and who loved God with every fiber of her being, who wanted nothing more than to be the handmaiden of the Lord. That's Mary. No wonder God chose Mary to be the mother of his son. Oh, this thing? It's a long story. Well, see, when Mary was almost to give birth, you remember Caesar Augustus made a decree that we all had to go for a census and everybody had to go back to their ancestral hometown. And for Mary and me, of course, we were both descendants of David, and so we had to go back to Bethlehem. And so we got there, and well, it was my fault. I take full responsibility. I just assumed that once we got there, we'd be able to find a place to stay. That one of our cousins would certainly have room for us. But it was crazy. We got to Bethlehem, and the place was just bulging with people. It was like a pregnant woman, and I had one with me. And so we tried to find a place to stay. There was no place at all. So I thought, well, we'll leave Bethlehem, we'll go to Jerusalem, which is just a couple miles away, and we can find a place to stay there. And we just started when the birth pangs began. And the baby was coming, and the baby was coming fast. So there was an inn there, and we'd been there once before, and he said there was no room for us, but I thought, look, we can try again. So I went to the inn, and I knocked on the door, and the innkeeper opened, and I explained the situation, and he said, there is no place for you here, but, well, there's a stable in the back. You can go there. At least you'll be safe. And so we went around back to the stable. Well, it was full of donkeys. I bet every person staying in that inn had put their donkey in that stable that night. But, at least the warm bodies of the animals kept it warm in there, and it was dry, and somehow it felt safe. So anyway, getting back to this, he had 2 big mangers there from which the animals were all eating the straw that they placed in the manger. But over against the wall, kind of in a corner, there was this old rickety manger. I suppose it was in such bad shape he'd stopped using a long time ago and maybe just hadn't had the heart to throw it away. So we put some straw in it, and when Mary gave birth to Jesus, well, we put him in the manger, and that was his first bed. Well, we stayed there for a couple of days until Mary was well enough to travel and we could find another place to go. And well, we were getting ready to leave. I'm not even sure exactly why I said it, but I said to the innkeeper, you know that old manger you've got out there that we were using for a baby bed? I said, could I have it? And he laughed and said, take it, please take it. So I took it apart and I put it in with our stuff, and I decided that someday when Jesus was a little older, when he was able to understand, we'd tell him the story about his birth. So tonight's the night. So I've been putting it back together again, and tonight when Mary and I are with Jesus, we're going to tell him the story of the shepherds and the angel that sang the news of the birth of the baby, and the wise men that came, and the stable filled with all the donkeys, and the manger. The manger, the baby bed fit for a king.